once you find out that you do have a registered sex offender in the church, okay, how should the church handle it? I think there's two ways. You may disagree with me, but I think there's two ways that the church can handle it. Let's talk about those.
Well, I think there are three ways, actually. The first way is probably what most churches do, and that's nothing. They don't know what to do. Maybe they haven't thought about it. It's just not an issue that's risen to the level of urgency where church leadership feels we need to do something about it. We do not recommend that. Now, the other two options would be a policy of total exclusion. Totally exclude all registered sex offenders. Some churches do that. The largest survey, Jerry, ever done of church practices in this country with regard to how to handle sex offenders on your premises was done by Christianity Today 3 years ago. And it was interesting. In the survey, one of the questions was, what do you think the appropriate response would be to knowledge that you have a registered sex offender attending your congregation? And of those that said the appropriate response is total exclusion of that person, I have to admit I was a little surprised with that. It was only 3% said that we would totally exclude that person. Now, I will say that in my opinion, there are some situations when I think total exclusion is appropriate. Let me just mention two of them. One would be if the crime or the crimes for which this person was previously guilty that put him on a sex offender registry are particularly heinous. And this guy's out of prison for whatever reason. The Adam Walsh Child Protection Act of 2006, federal law that requires all states to have sex offender registries. It requires the national government, the federal government, the Department of Justice to implement a sex offender registry that's accessible by the public. That particular statute segregates sex crimes into three categories: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. And Tier 1 are the least offensive crimes. You're on that registry for just 15 years. Tier 2 are more severe crimes, sexual-oriented crimes, and you're on the registry for 25 years. Tier 3 are the most heinous crimes. You're on the registry for life. So the point is, if you have somebody that's a Tier 3 sex offender, this person has been determined to be the most severe category of crime. So I would say that for Tier 3 offenders, Jerry, you may be able to make a case, I think perhaps easily, in fact, that maybe these people ought to be scrutinized very carefully. And then, with respect to total exclusion, so some crimes are so heinous that I think they should be excluded from church. The second reason I think a church may want to adopt this policy is if some of the offender's victims still attend the church. And so the point here is, this frequently happens. Maybe one or more of this person's victims continue to attend the church. And does the church, should it not intervene here and protect the victims from being re-victimized every Sunday by seeing this guy? Not just the victims, but their families, their mothers and fathers, their parents, their siblings, their grandparents perhaps, to have this continual re-victimization. Stop it. In my opinion, that's another reason. So that's the second response churches have. The first response is doing nothing. The second response is total exclusion, which, as I say, may be appropriate for Tier 3 offenses that are particularly heinous, or if one or more victims continues to attend the church. Now, the third option that a church has, in fact, according to the Christianity Today survey, this was the option selected by about 80% of churches when asked, what do you think the appropriate response would be? And that's getting to your point of the limited attendance agreement, that the person is free to attend the church as long as he or she signs a limited attendance agreement that has a number of features to it. And I think, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think that type of approach really resonates with church leaders. It's more merciful, it's less harsh, it's less condemning, and I think if it's worded properly, this can put the church in a position of being viewed as having acted reasonably under the circumstances, which means that it's probably not going to be negligent.
Actually, I call it a conditional attendance policy. Is the wording that I've used with most of the churches that call in with us. And